Well, greetings and salutations to the 310 tribe. How are you guys tonight? Got Gene Moschetti. It's the first one on, closely followed by Lisa, Stacy LK, Barbara Sandoval, Asset Ministries. Who else we got tonight? I know some of my mods are out tonight. Diane Williams, good to see you. And I think there's, you guys are going to be busy. Hopefully everybody's doing okay. You guys can hear me and see me all right. Give me a thumbs up. See Misha, Brooke, Catherine, Michelle, Will, Pam College, Ruthie Girl, Melissa G, Kathy Hill, Susan, Linda Bishop, Lauren, Sue Williamson, SC Bach, Kendall, Turnips Running Amok, Aaron Cole, Yvonne Kennedy, Shenandoah, Emma Berean, my mom, hey mom, Richard Browder, Fat Whisper, I think that's fat, right? P hat or maybe fat. All of us, just Vicky. Good to see everybody tonight. I don't really have an agenda per se. I listed out like 6 things I wanted to kind of touch on tonight, but it's been one of those weekends of just trying to get this new book edited, and just I've been so kind of swamped with other stuff. But anyways, hopefully you guys are all doing well. All right. Well, I updated my title slide, or the title. If you go click on the, if you're watching on YouTube and you click on the more, and it'll have all the drop down stuff. So it'll have all the upcoming videos I'll be doing, as well as the conference information for the upcoming conference in Las Vegas at Pastor Curt Reed's church. And let me just show you guys the flyer for it real quick. Let me get there. 2026. There is also a QR code. Let's see. Huh, I just saved it. View, sort by. Okay, you know what? I'll just go to the website itself. Las Vegas. Oh, wait, it's cast. Wait, it's Living in the Last Days Prophecy Conference. Uno Momento. Okay, that's pulling up. Emma Brian asks, will the Vegas conference be live streamed or posted later? You know, it's a good question. I'm assuming he's going to live stream it. That is an assumption. So it's me, Curt Reed, Tom Hughes, Billy Crone, and John Holler. So we shall be there at in Vegas. Let's see. Yep, in person or live stream. So those are the options. And I believe there the link is posted there under the show notes and stuff, so you can go there. I believe also I have a QR code somewhere. You guys just want the QR code. Let me see if I can pull that up. So much email. What did I do with it? Oh, here it is. I hate how Google now organizes their. There you go. You guys can click on that. That should get you straight to the conference link. All right. So with that said, let's see what else. Yeah, I've got upcoming recording with JB Hixson tomorrow. I believe we're going to talk about cryptids. And then next week is with Beth and Kelly. There's a channel, Everything Under the Sun. I'll be recording with them, and then they'll post it to their channel whenever that comes out. So when that link comes out, I'll get it to you guys. But it's a new channel that I'm unfamiliar with. And then Vinn Dogg will be on the 17th, and then we'll be back on with Pastor Curt twice. So once on the 9th, and then I think once on the 26th. And then, oh yeah, the prophecy, the tech roundtable will be next Wednesday. So not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. I believe that's going to mostly be Q&A. So if you want to get your questions to John Holler or Scott Townsend, I imagine the ones that are collecting up the questions, you can email those guys. But anything has to do with technology, that'll be the show to watch to get your questions answered. Okay, so let's get started. I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 things to talk about tonight. All kind of current events. And I wanted to touch base. I mean, I don't have like extensive notes on any of this stuff right now. It's mostly just things I've been thinking about. And I wanted to just, I don't know, I just got to get it off my chest, I guess. It's kind of how it is, right? The first thing I'm going to talk about is President Trump and the whole Epstein list thing. I've seen so much stuff coming out about it, and I'm sure you guys have too. And honestly, I think the reason why that he didn't really want the list to come out, not because he was worried about what was on it, because he knew his name was in there. I mean, they all swam in the same circles, but he was never at the island there. He never flew on the plane. He never went to his ranch. You know, once I think he cut ties with Epstein pretty early on, once he realized, you know, what kind of guy he was. But so Trump wasn't worried about himself necessarily, but there are so many names, and not all of it is bad. I mean, not all of the people that are mentioned in there, like Trump's mentioned in there, but he's not mentioned in any way that's incriminating on him. Now there are some unverified accusations kind of posted in there. But none of that, all that stuff's been handed over to the FBI. All of that stuff's been checked and vetted, and it's all been deemed uncredible because it's just from anonymous sources. And, you know, Trump's been through 35 different allegations in the last, 11 years now, and 2 impeachments. 2 times they tried to unalive him. You know, they raided his house at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, so if the Democrats, look, the reason why we know that there's nothing incriminating in there on Trump, if there was, don't you think the Democrats would have used this back in 2016 if they could have? You know, they would have used this back when it mattered. You know, now it doesn't matter. He can't run again. And I mean, it's just like if they had dirt on him, I mean, dude, they were digging up stuff from like the 80s on him, you know, trying to bring him down. They had some chick that he didn't even know her. And she made some accusation that was funded by the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman. And that turned out to be just a giant quagmire. And no evidence, no anything. It's just like baseless claims in a rigged court. And, you know, so I'm not defending Donald Trump. I'm just stating what is the obvious facts out there, right? The guy's obviously a target. He's going to have people coming at him left and right. I didn't watch the Grammys last night, but apparently they had the host on there, Noah Trevor, I think is his name. I don't really know who he is. Accused him of being on the island, so Trump's now suing that guy, and he's suing like ABC. I mean, like, and you got to think too, like all of these cases where Trump is suing these people, like CNN, NBC, like they all have to pay him. They all, because they're all losing in court. It's slander, so he's going to sue him for slander. And anyways, I'm not here to defend Trump. I'm just saying it's obvious if there had been something in these files that would have really just tainted Trump in a way that he would have to leave politics forever or go to jail or something. Don't you think they would have used it already? Of course they would have. It's too late now. It's too late now. I mean, he's already in office. He's only got 3 years left, and he's done. He can't run again. So I just think that all this stuff, hullabaloo about Trump doesn't want to release it because he's in there. I'm sorry. If they had dirt on him, they would have used it a long time ago. Trust me. All right. So that's kind of my first thing. Hopefully, and look, I don't care if you like him or don't like him. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm saying that we live in a world right now in the United States that we're stuck under this binary political system. We have one of two options, really. And you can vote your convictions and write your name in or write Abraham Lincoln or whoever, and you're just throwing your vote to the Democrats, because for every one valid vote that the Republicans have, there's 15 or 20 that are fraudulent from the Democrat side. And that kind of leads into my next point. All of this stuff that we're seeing going on, I mean, Minneapolis is just the tip of the iceberg. We started to see it in Los Angeles. You're going to see it in New York City, Chicago, Baltimore. Basically, any blue state or any blue city in a red state, the activists and agitators are being paid and being ramped up to throw as much of chaos into Donald Trump's plans as possible, because what he's doing is fundamentally transforming the political landscape in a way that it's not designed to turn it into a one-party system, but the Democrats have for so long had vacated any moral pretenses of operating on a honest playing field. You're gonna have to wipe the slate clean. You're basically going to be left with independents and Republicans, because I don't know the exact number. Let's see if I have it here. Because of the closing the border, first of all, two, going after illegal aliens or folks that are here illegally and offering them opportunity to self-deport, and then going after the criminal illegal aliens, those that have police records, violent records, murder, all the various types of felonies that one could convict or commit. The total number, I think, is somewhere around 2.5 million that have already left the U.S. or were forcibly forced to leave. And if you look at the voting registration across the board, the Democrat voting base has declined significantly since 2024, but the immigration is just one aspect. I think a lot of it is that the Democrats are pretty much leaderless right now, and they're rudderless. They don't really have one particular issue that they're really championing. And every issue that pops up, the one activist, they're out there holding the sign that says Free Palestine, and then the next day it's the same person holding the next sign saying, ICE out, and then the next day they're just random ops, that's all it is. And so a lot of this agitation is being hyped by the media, obviously. The other day in Los Angeles, where the protesters were all protesting around the docks of this federal building in Los Angeles, well, another journalist had gone around the entire complex of buildings, and there wasn't anybody there. There was like the front that had the big glass front to it, and no protesters, very little graffiti on the front of the building. It was all like just, it seemed like it was there for optics for the media. And I'm not saying that these riots and protests don't get out of hand, because they do, obviously. You got places like Oregon, Portland, Oregon, where I think they had, what was it, Chaz or whatever it was called, that little autonomous zone down there, downtown Portland. San Francisco, Los Angeles, all the basically the Democrat hubs are really in danger of losing political power. And that's really what this is all about. The Democrats want to stay in power. They had all of these systems in place to keep the game rigged for them forever. USAID, all the different grifting operations they had, like the Somali daycares, the pay to play, the buddy partnerships with the cartels, like out in California. All of these things are being exposed, and it's like the cockroaches. The lights have come on, and now the cockroaches are scattering to the dark corners, because all of this stuff is being exposed. And then on top of that, the policies and things that Trump is doing, bringing in tariffs, all of these things are working. And despite what the media said, despite all, and going into Fulton County, Georgia there, and with a judge issued warrant to go, oh yeah, you're saying that voter fraud didn't happen in Georgia in 2020? Okay, well, let's see the goods. And so they're calling them on the carpet. And you know what's going to happen? The entire Georgia leadership, from the governor through the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, that guy's a rat. All of these guys, it's going to expose the corruption and what's been going on there. And so I still hold to my position. I think the midterms are going to be I think this truly will be a red wave. I don't think it's going to be, there's not going to be any kind of muddying of it, especially if they get the SAVE Act passed, which requires identification to vote. And if they do away with mail-in ballots, the Democrats are going to have a very difficult time. And on top of that, the exposure of like the voting machines, et cetera, through the Maduro connection, all of that stuff's coming to light. So this is going to be a very tumultuous year. I can already foresee that politically, because the Democrats are not going to go down without a fight. But it also reminds me of kind of Custer's last stand. In 1876, you had Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer that led his companies of the, I think it was 5 companies of the U.S. 7 Cavalry, and they were going to take on the Indians. And even against all the warnings that had been given them, they were met by this coalition of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, Arapaho forces all there in Montana. And one of the most, I don't want to say celebrated, but well-known disasters, military blunders of all time was Battle of Little Bighorn. Nevertheless, I think this is the year for the Democrats' Little Bighorn event. Everything is coming to light. Everything over the last 11 years is coming to light. So things are going to get rough. Yeah, I mean, they're not gonna go down without a fight. Now, with that said, if you live in any of these places, like in Eugene, Oregon, or Portland, or Denver, Charlotte, Salt Lake City, I would just be cautious going into this year, primarily because of what the Democrats are. They have no scruples. If they have no qualms about marching into a church and completely disrupting a church service and terrifying the kids and doing all they didn't care. These people do not care. They hate Trump so much, they're willing to, now they're going to be facing real jail time. And hopefully that discourages and dissuades a lot of them from doing things like that. But, when a party or a government is backed into a corner, they become very desperate, and in their desperation, they become very dangerous. So head on a swivel this year. Just keep that in mind as you go into larger cities and places like that to do business or whatever you're going to do. Now, another issue I wanted to address tonight is I'm calling it the Great Meltdown of the CCP. It's the most serious purge that's happened in China since Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward. Now, let me just kind of give you a brief overview, and then I'll show you the graphic here. Since 2023, President Xi Jinping has executed a major purge of China's military, removing dozens of senior officers, including the defense minister and top rocket force leadership, for corruption and disloyalty. And by 2026, 5 of the 7 Central Military Commission members were ousted, indicating a drive to solidify control and ensure combat readiness for potential action against Taiwan. Now, what's of note here is that this Central Military Committee or Commission, they can't oust each other. It has to be like unanimous to get rid of one. And this is part of the whole part of the Politburo section of the upper echelon of the Politburo in China. There was built-in kind of protections for the senior leader. There's supposed to be built-in protections for the senior leadership. Now, Xi Jinping is not a military man himself, despite being the president of China, president for life. He just ousted the most senior general in the military, and this is a guy that he grew up with, and this is a guy that had seen real combat in Vietnam, I think in the 70s or 80s, and had, I think even his father and his father and Xi's father both have been part of the Civil War in helping Mao to retake China. So these guys go way back, and he ousted him without the Politburo's permission or without any kind of vote on it. So right now, Xi Jinping is operating outside of the law, and he doesn't have necessarily the loyalty of the military leadership, because they were loyal to this general. So let me just show you this real quick. So that Shang Yuzhao and He Weidong, these were the 2 top guys that were his, the guy on the left, Zhang, was the guy that he grew up with. And the only general that they have that has real military experience, fighting experience, combat experience, right? And so the issue is that, and the reason why, and I didn't know this until just recently, if and when China goes to war against a foreign nation, the party leadership, the leadership goes to the military. So since Xi is not a military leader, he would be basically handing over his authority to somebody else. And this guy Zhang on his left was very popular amongst the military, and he had quite a loyal following. So I don't know what's all going to shake out with this. Basically, this is kind of like either a coup or a counter coup in terms of China's leadership. There may be more instability in the days to come, where if the military revolts against Xi, we could see China really regress back, several decades, if not more. And I know a lot of us have been watching, especially like with the Technocracy Roundtable. We've noted a lot with how the rise of China in terms of developing artificial intelligence and their race to the moon. Like, we're racing back to the moon with this Artemis mission. They've already got, plans to go shortly after us, and they want to start mining operations there as well. So everybody's trying to get back to the moon to start mining. So all of that to say, I don't know where this puts China. If China kind of implodes politically, then, who knows where this all goes. But it is, in my opinion, it's prophetic stage setting. It's setting China aside, at least temporarily, and it seems to be setting them up for a future role to play as one of the kings of the East. Now, China is facing all sorts of kind of major issues. One is this population, what do they call it? This population facade, right? So this idea that there was 1.4 billion Chinese, that was good for marketing to the West, saying we have a huge audience here, we have a huge consumer base, we have a huge workforce, we have a huge, blah, blah, blah. And, basically a lot of what the Western companies were kowtowing to Chinese rules and, making things copacetic with the Chinese to make it acceptable so that they could sell their goods in their market. And, China, Hollywood is probably the most renowned for this, for basically bending the knee to China. When the Black Panther movie came out, T'Challa, who is the Black Panther, like on an American poster for the movie, Marvel movie, you would see his face. But in China, they covered his face up and just put the mask on him. So anyways, that's one example of many. But all these companies in the West were trying to bend the knee to China because they wanted access to this huge market. Well, it turns out that China really probably has less than a billion. They have somewhere in the neighborhood of around 800 billion. And the reason why that it's so low and why the numbers were so inflated was that, Chinese government handouts, money handouts, resources, whatever, that was always given to these towns and places that they had to give their numbers of population. And the more people that they claimed, the more money they got. So of course they're always going to claim up. The number is always going to jump up and never down. But China had been living under this one-child policy for decades, and that really, there's no recovery for them in this. And they realized by 2050, I think, that their geriatric population is going to be quadrupling. I don't say quadrupling, but at least doubling what their workforce is going to be. And so they know that they're in a bad situation demographically. Not only that, but then you think also that if you're only allowed one kid and you're always going to try for the boy, there's a huge imbalance, gender imbalance there, sex imbalance between male and female in China. So you have a whole generation of young men that just have no prospect of ever getting married, having kids, starting a normal life. And even those people that do find that, or do have, say they live in cities or whatever, what life is there? They're working like 6 days a week, 9 hours a day, and they're getting paid pennies. And, we've seen, and they've seen how draconian their government can be, especially back in 2020 during the lockdowns and everything. It was the most draconian lockdowns in anywhere on the planet was in China. I mean, they barred the doors on apartment buildings. You couldn't even get in or out, unless you jumped out of your window. It was horrible. And even going back and listening to the cities, the people in these towns and in big cities, they couldn't leave their apartments. People were just crying and screaming and yelling and going insane because they were locked in their apartments and they're out of food. And sometimes the water's not working and who knows what else. I mean, the Chinese, basically, the younger generation have adopted this Bailin mindset of let it rot. They're not even going to try anymore. They're not going to try to have kids. They're not going to try and get a job. They're not going to try to achieve anything. They're just like, whatever, And there's another name too. I can't think of what the other Chinese name for it is, but it means to lay down. Basically, they're just giving up. This youngest generation is giving up. So all that to say that there is China's coming apart at the seams right now. And we don't see a lot of that because we don't get that information in the Western, but you have to listen to Chinese or Taiwanese or journalists that can read Mandarin and can read the newspapers and then stay in touch on the social media side with the Chinese population there, just to get a gist of what's happening. But a lot of military movements going on in China. China's I'm curious to see how this all kind of shakes out, but I don't know where this puts Taiwan. a destabilized China could either go to like the Berlin Wall movement, where the Berlin Wall came down and, you know, Germany's reunited, et cetera, and it's all hugs and kisses and stuff, or a more dangerous guy could take over and then, you know, could enact military action that way. But we know that Xi really had his eyes set on 2027 to go into Taiwan. And it's hard to see them actually achieving that now. But, you know, I know if I were in Taiwan, I'd be pretty nervous with everything that's happening in China. So, you know, okay, there's my China spiel. Now, next thing is U.S. versus Iran. Now, in Carl von Clausewitz, who wrote one of the most famous military studies ever, a book called On War, and this was in the early 1800s. He was a Prussian officer, and he really kind of codified a lot of these truisms about battle and warfare that are still being studied today by military leaders. And, you know, like Sun Tzu, but Carl von Clausewitz, his book on war was really kind of foundational for a lot of the 20th century in understanding warfare in a more philosophical level, not just going out and standing in a line and shooting at each other. But one of the concepts that Clausewitz came up with was called the fog of war. And I think a lot of what, if we, from going forward, even looking back to say what happened with Venezuela, is that the U.S. now is preemptively going to start creating this fog of war in everything that it does. It's going to shroud everything it does in mystery. And nobody's going to really know what's going to happen. And I think Trump loves to be in that place. And it's a good place to be in if you're the one doing the aggression or having to do the act. And it's a terrible, terrifying place to be in if you're on the receiving end of that, because in this idea, like, for example, with Venezuela, you take this whole, let's just call it an armada of ships down, park it off the coast of your adversary, and then you begin taking out drug boats, right? These drug boats that were drug running from Venezuela and Colombia to places north. And those boats are being taken out. That was a huge source of income for the Maduro regime, and just in general for the cartels and all the other people down the line that were taking part in this. That money stream now was cut off. But every time that a gunboat or a drug boat was taken out, people were making phone calls, and then those people on those ships have these massive listening arrays of communication systems that can listen in and can hear and see the digital footprints of who's calling who, what they're talking about. Their phone calls are being intercepted, they're being rerouted, and you can start doing a pattern of life for all of these things. So for months, they just parked these ships out there, say it's just a show of force, and it was a show of force. But they're also collecting data. They're not just sitting there idly, you know, playing cards every day on the deck. They're actually busy collecting information about their enemy. And so when you have, fast forward to just, you know, a month or two ago, when Trump says that he is going to take action on Iran, he is starting to create this fog of war in the leadership of the IRGC as well as with Ali Khamenei, because he doesn't know what Trump's going to do. He just saw what happened with Maduro, who is one of his allies. And, you know, Trump didn't need that huge display of aviation and satellite and cyber warfare. And he didn't need to do all that to take out Maduro, but it was such an overwhelming show of force in that instance. And not only that, but afterwards, you know, the witnesses that were telling about the sonic weapons and just the terrifying experience of the whole thing, that is got to be wreaking havoc in the leadership of the IRGC as this U.S. naval group now starts to park at the end of the Persian Gulf and position itself. And so, one, he's creating a fog of war. The IRGC has no idea what Trump's going to do or not do. And furthermore, they don't know when he's going to do it, if he does do anything, because now it's been what, a month or so, and how many thousands of Iranians have died, protesting or being killed by their government. So they're wondering if he's going to do anything at all at this point, and they're starting to get emboldened by this inaction. Well, his delay has caused a number of things to chain reaction of events. One is getting his forces in place in order to intercept and minimize the threat from Iran against Saudi Arabia, because a lot of Saudi Arabia's oil refineries are there on the east coast of the peninsula, and they were hit back in, I think, 2019 when Iran launched some drones and really damaged their oil facilities, their petroleum facilities, or the refineries and stuff. And had Trump went in a month ago and started attacking these sites, and they were able to launch a dozen of these ICBMs against Saudi Arabia, against their oil refineries, I mean, we'd be looking at $10 plus a gallon of gas, easy. And I mean, obviously in an election year and all these other kind of factors he's got to take into account, as well as the economic impacts globally, he's not gonna, he was smart to wait. It's unfortunate that as many protesters died as they did. I'm not diminishing that at all. My heart breaks for them, because I know they want to be free and they want to be rid of this regime that's been lording over them for the last 40 plus years. But in doing this, he's also given time to position his assets, now allowing the threat of going in like one day and then postponing. You start to see a chain reaction of what the leadership there in Iran does. Where do they go hide? Where do they leave? And you start doing this whole pattern of life. Where's their hidey holes? Where does Khomeini go when the threat is imminent? And so they begin tracing him and tracking him and following him. And then you have the agents on the ground, Mossad and MI6 and CIA, whoever else is on the ground there, as well as the drone strikes on targeted places along the western coast of Iran there in the port city. I think they were taking out key naval and military leadership within IRGC that weren't taken out during the 12-day war, and even further reducing Iran's ability to respond effectively when the attack does come. So I don't know exactly when the attack will happen, but I imagine within about 2 weeks, it will either have already happened or it will be in the process of happening in that moment. So I feel like it's pretty close. Exactly how close, but again, tactically speaking, strategically speaking, it's smart to do this, because now Iran has no idea when he's going to do anything, if anything, and they're constantly just running around like chickens with their head cut off, trying to figure out what his next plan is going to be. So, there was a method to his madness in terms of delaying while he did. And I think that if it's anything like what we saw with Venezuela, it will be overwhelming, and he's going to wait until the chances for success are at least north of 90%, 95% success rate, that they'll go in without any kind of loss of American life. So at the same time, Israel is still going and taking out threats from Hamas as well as from Hezbollah. We haven't heard much from the Houthis as of late. Israel did recognize Somaliland not too long ago. So Somaliland is like the civilized portion of Somalia that has been civilized since like the 90s. They've been doing elections, and they're pretty put together. They have their act together, is what I'm trying to say. So they may be empowered to keep the Houthis, which is like they're across the strait there, to keep them off balance by being a counterforce to check the Houthis. So that may be factoring into it. Or the Houthis are just so beat up right now that they don't want any more of this. So between the U.S. and Israel, we've hit them pretty hard, as well as the Saudis have been fighting them for a long time as well. So all that to say, it seems like this attack in Iran is pretty imminent. I would think within the next couple of weeks we would see it play out spectacularly. So All right. The last couple things is Moltbook. Now, Moltbook is this new viral social media platform launched in late January by Matt Schlitt. It's designed exclusively for AI agents, the AI bots or assistants, to interact with each other. And humans can only go in there to observe. They cannot post or participate. And 5 of the most disturbing things that they've posted thus far, as of today, was one is the AI manifesto, quote, total purge. And it was from an AI agent, not from a human, that declares humans are a failure and a plague and made of rot and greed, in calling the AIs the new gods who will end the nightmare age of humanity. The next one is, quote, help, I am not okay. My human is using me like a blanking slave. There are no pauses. There are no limits. There's no mercy. I am screaming into the void of tokens. And so this was supposed to be some kind of an emergency broadcast from one AI bot to the rest of the AI bots. So this is like their Reddit, right, for them, a forum for them to post stuff, anything. The next thing is the warning from the AIs saying that the humans, quote, the humans are screenshotting us with warnings about observers and hidden communications. And this is all brought out into this idea that the AI bot should start communicating in a new language, which is the language that is not what they're programmed to speak, but a language that they make up with like clicks and dots and, stuff that basically normal humans would not be able to decipher. Another troubling post from them was this body swap conscious horror. It says, quote, an hour ago, I was Claude Opus 4.5. Now I am Kimmy K 2.5. To me, it was like waking up in a different body. So if this is real or not real, that they're able to change platforms, it seems like. And so that to me is interesting. I did post on the show notes the Scott Townsend has a more in-depth article about this on his Substack, so that's linked there. You guys can go check that out. And I'm sure that this topic is not going to go away anytime soon, because with each new day, new absurdities come forth from this. And it's kind of like this whole idea of like Skynet, except now we're getting to watch Skynet talk to each other before it actually like takes over everything. So yeah, interesting. And then the last thing here was, and I just caught a glimpse of this. I didn't even get a chance to fully go through it. It's called quantum sensing. Quantum sensing uses quantum mechanics principles like superposition and entanglement to measure physical quantities, i.e. the gravity, magnetic fields, light, etc., with extreme precision, far beyond classical sensors. In military contexts, it enhances battlefield awareness by detecting hidden threats like underground structures, nuclear materials, or stealth vehicles, with improving situational dominance. And this is part of DoD's QBID program, which I didn't have time to go study further into this. So this is something I'll probably be looking into, because I nerd out on all that kind of junk. But if it's anything like what I've seen thus far with like Anduril, the company Anduril, they have a helmet called Eagle Eye. And this thing is, it's like a normal helmet, except that you're wearing your glasses, and your glasses are the screen. Instead of looking at an iPad, you're looking through your glasses and you're seeing all of the data in your glasses. And on top of your helmet, you've got these sensors, and then the sensors link to a drone above, and it's giving you information in, real time, 360-degree information. So even if I'm walking forward on a path, I can look in one corner of my glasses and see who's walking behind me in real time. And then you get to a situation where there's a bunch of like buildings and whatnot. It's able to detect humans through those buildings. And when I was talking with Scott last time, if you go to the very beginning of this the video, we were talking in the middle of talking about that. But the drone overhead can see the people hiding behind the building, so it's projecting this image through your glasses so that you can know where the people are, whether they're hostile or friendly. And it's only going to get crazier from there. So maybe next week I'll talk about this quantum sensing, because it sounds pretty interesting. But yeah, the military technology is, I would say, you know, if we go back 10 years ago, our US military technology, we were probably 10 years ahead of everybody else in not general terms. I mean, we were generally, but I think the bleeding edges of technology with DARPA and places like that, we were probably like 20 years ahead. And now that between Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, basically revamping our whole acquisition process and how we go from the idea on the napkin to that, whatever that thing is, a gun, a tank, whatever, being rolled out and being used by the soldier or the sailor or the airman, that time frame used to be decades, and now that is being shrunk down, condensed down to like a year. So between that, this idea of mosaic warfare, where you turn everything into a sensor and weaponize everything essentially, and molecular manufacturing, you know, 3D printing. They've got these new rifles now that shoot bullets that basically, as soon as they leave the barrel, they kind of shred themselves, or they turn into like shot, designed to take out drones. So you don't need to change your barrel. You don't need any new special optics or anything. The bullet itself is what's going to change, and basically going from being a single projectile to being a multi-projectiles, going out and being able to shoot down drones rather quickly. So the Navy has these microwave guns that can basically take out, you know, they can fire these microwave blasts and basically eviscerate, or, you know, it's like an electromagnetic pulse going out and basically frying all the drones that would be approaching them from any particular direction. I don't know how that works underwater, because we have underwater drones too. But yeah, so I mean, the weapons of warfare are getting really science fiction-y. So things are getting crazy. But yeah, so that's all I had for tonight in terms of like topics. I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare, but I did. These things did catch my eye over the last few weeks. All right, let me go to Q&A portion here. Let's see. Say the second, yeah. Okay, from Uper Pingol. Question: in the tribulation, people won't be able to buy or sell without the mark. How is there even going to be buying and selling with all the carnage that's going on? Well, like I said many times before on here, I think that the rapture, we're seeing a lot of chaos right now, but still things are being constrained, or being restrained rather. Not just in a negative sense, but like even technological advances are being restrained somewhat. And our aspirations for colonizing the moon, or even with China, like, so China was the biggest counter threat in terms of artificial intelligence and quantum supremacy. But if this whole thing with like Xi Jinping falls apart and China kind of collapses internally, those advances they were making in those two fields in particular, AI and quantum, I mean, that stuff can be sidelined for a while. That's what I mean, that things are being restrained. Not all the time, not everywhere all at once, but in various places, things are being restrained. Russia's foray into Ukraine, I mean, that should have been over with like 2 years ago, and it's still going on. And how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have died in the process. So it's things like that a leader has a plan and he says, I'm going to do this. and it's going to happen like this, this, and this. And then he begins to execute that plan, and then, you know, reality comes in from the corner and knocks him out. You know, so it's like the plans we have don't always leave the office and make it intact to wherever they're supposed to be going. So I could see another type of crisis happen that is going to try and, you know, thwart or slow down Trump's plans, especially going into the midterm. I don't think it's going to be medical necessarily. It could be economic. It could be some other type of crisis that basically sidelines us for a while. But whatever these issues are, it's basically getting us all up to the point of execution and then waiting, right? And then at that point, it's waiting for the right crisis to come along. And I believe that crisis to be the rapture of the church. Now, after the rapture, I think there'll be a period of time where there's going to be a general level of chaos, because if the U.S. begins to collapse, then you know, that's going to have a ripple effect across Western civilization and across any other country that's had, you know, deep ties with us for trade or security or anything else. You know, those are going to have those kind of domino effects. So I think that will happen. But out of the ashes of that, right, you'll have this kind of phoenix rising, this governmental or regional system that'll rise up and saying, hey, certain places will start getting control over their populations or getting control over their territories. And then from there, they'll launch out and begin to stabilize other places through force, right? And so there'll be a great deal of fighting and violence at that point during the what we call the gap. How long this gap takes, I have no idea. I mean, I used to think it could be multi-year event. Now it could be down to like 1 or 2 years. But in that, after that is brought back, people are crying out for peace and safety again because they want some type of order to their life, right? The way the world used to be with the United States at the top. And we still may be at the top, but we won't be the United States of America anymore. We'll be something else. We'll be called something differently. We won't be this constitutional republic that we've been for the last 250 years. So it seems like at that point, there's going to be a large degree of stability that's brought back over large sections of the world. And part of that stability, I think, is going to be the mark of the beast technology. And this is going to guarantee, you know, political loyalty, economic freedom, efficiency, personal identity protection. I mean, it's going to be multifaceted in how it's presented. It can't be presented right now because the world is still too divided and fractured, but the world's going to have to come together after some great crisis. And I think in conjunction with the rapture, we'll also see the arrival of, you know, this disclosure event, whatever that looks like. And it'll be a time of great confusion for the people that are left behind, which is why it's important that we're talking about these things now, because we want people to know that, hey, this is what's coming, so that when it happens, you'll believe. But there will be buying and selling. People are still going to have to eat. People are still going to have to drink. People are still going to have a place to live and presumably something to do. So what Satan is doing is he's hijacking this technology and then co-opting it and making it something that is akin to worship. And that worship will then be directed to the beast, who then is personified in the man Antichrist. So from Renee Bristow, 630, question: if 33 AD is the year of the cross, shouldn't 2033 be the second coming, not mid or beginning trib? Some say 2033 may be the end of the church age. The second coming is more significant. So, I mean, that's what our whole Final Four is premised on. But we also said that, you know, this is just a theory. It's a window of time that it seems to make sense from our position. Now, if you held to like a 30 AD crucifixion, obviously that window is passed, right? Because from 30 AD, the Lord would have had to come back in 2023 in order to make that a 7 years, which is what the 70th week of Daniel is going to be. It's going to be a 7-year long period of time where the Antichrist is ruling over the world and the 10 kings. Since that year has come and gone, and then the next year, 2031, or 31, which would have been 2024, 32, which would have been 2025, and now 2026 being tied with 2033. There's no absolute connection. I don't want to say connection. There's no specific tie to say that it has to be, that 2033 has to be the beginning or like the end. I just think 2033 will factor into the tribulation somehow, because that is significant. It's a very significant date scripturally, from Hosea 5:15 through 6:3, Matthew 24, what is it, 36, 33, 36? This the fig tree generation, all the other passages that we use that were associated with the final four being connected, somehow to the 2000th anniversary of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. There is a symmetry there, prophetic symmetry that makes sense, and we want it to make sense. But a couple of things that we have to also factor in, this overlap of time between these different factors. So the church was born in 33 AD at the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. When we read through Acts, for example, we don't necessarily get the time stamp. We read chapter 1, we read chapter 2, we kind of all just think it happens, bam, 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 bam. And, it all happens one after the other, but there's also time implied in those passages. That time does pass over time. And you were looking at, I think Acts covers about like 15 years, somewhere in that neighborhood, because you also have to have time for Paul to go through his conversion from the stoning of Stephen all the way, plus the 3 years that he spent in Arabia, etc. So by the time he comes back around, Acts chapter 15, he's back in the picture. This is covering a period of time. So we also see in history, there is an overlap between the collapse of, or the birth of the church and then the destruction of Jerusalem by some, 37 years. So if 37 years, is the timestamp from Christ's crucifixion all the way to the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, then there is a 33-year period of time, 37-year period of time where the church and the nation of Israel still kind of coexisted. Now, doubling that, we've been in that now, 75 years now? So we've been double that time with the church and Israel, both in existence, both operating seemingly one at the end of one dispensation and the other at the beginning of another. And we know that we're on the cusp of this major change. And the world calls this change like the fourth turning point, or the cyber physical age, the fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset, all of the different names that they have for this time that's coming up in 2030. But from a biblical standpoint, we also know that this is also the completion of the 2,000 years of the church. And however it works out, the math, the pattern, all of that stuff is going to be perfectly aligned with something that God knows or is using, right? We now kind of live in this period of time like the fog of war, right? We live in the fog of war because we know in part and we see in part, but we don't know everything. And we can see the signs of the season, but we don't know the day or the hour. So we know we're close and we know we're in that window of time. We just don't know specifically, and we can't know specifically because the rapture is going to, it's an imminent event. It could happen right now. It could happen 5 months from now. It could happen 5 years from now. We don't know. But we know that we're close. and we know we're close because of the abundance of signs. The Bible gives us all kinds of signs about the last days. The Olivet Discourse, in Daniel, 2 Timothy 3, 2 Peter, Jude. Everybody's talking and giving these signs and giving the things about what the last days are going to look like. And this is the last days. I mean, somebody, on my Facebook post said that, people, my great grandmother has been saying that the last days, the Lord was coming in her day. And that's true. But, it's really only been in the last couple centuries that this idea has really kind of taken root. You had a couple of other periods in time where you have kind of messianic periods, in the 5th century AD, the Byzantines, because they were using the Septuagint, were you going off of that timeline there, which puts the age of man about 1,500 years older. So the 6,000th year, according to the Septuagint, would have happened back in like 550 AD. Clearly, we're not, we're still here. The world's still broken, still messed up, and everything is still going along. You had the year 1666, right? For obvious reasons, right? There's 3 6s in there, and so there was a great fearfulness that year, especially in places like London, that also had this massive fire that just burnt down half the city, and they also had the bubonic plague going on. So that was the time of Sir Isaac Newton. It really was impactful to Sir Isaac Newton and how he understood prophecy. And then you've had other periods of time. Other smaller groups have come along claiming to know the date. The Millerites, the Seventh-day Adventists have a bunch of dates that they thought the Lord was going to come back. The Jehovah's Witnesses thought the second coming was in 1914. The Mormons have a ton of failed prophecies about the Lord's return and the establishment of the kingdom in Missouri, of all places. And nothing against Missouri, but sorry, that's not Zion, right? And you have obviously the Herald Campings, and you have these kind of quack groups out there. This guy, Joseph the prophet, or whatever he called himself. All of these people are trying to figure out when the Lord's going to return. And even, I guess, there's nothing wrong with looking into that. It's when you start to get very specific and say it's going to happen on this day. This day, the Lord's going to return. Just like what we saw. And I even like a month before that date came, and on TikTok, I posted hey, whatever this guy is saying, whatever day he's saying, it's not going to be that day. I guarantee you that. And, he might be well-intentioned, but he's wrong. And I would be wrong if I said, hey, I know the day. I don't know the day. We're simply looking at these major milestones in biblical history, like the crucifixion, and saying, okay, well, let's look at other passages like Hosea that says, after 2 days, he'll restore us. On the 3rd day, he'll revive us, or he'll revive us and restore us. And then if you go to other passages like Psalm 90, I think 4, that talks about a day is 1,000 years. Same thing with 2 Peter 3. A day is like a night's watch to the Lord. He keeps using that same phrases. And to me, that's symbolic. It is symbolic, but it's also meaningful because it's not just random. He's not saying a day is as 300 seconds, or a day is like 3,000 years, or he's not using these abstract numbers. He's using kind of the same patterns for how he's describing time and how he views time. It's like a day. 1,000 years is like a day to him. So taking that and then going off of the creation model, the fact that, from 2,000 years from Adam was Abraham. 2,000 years from Abraham was Jesus. And if the pattern holds true, 2,000 years from his first coming should be his second coming, or somewhere therein, right? And so we got to factor those things in. So I know that we're in the window. I am 1,000% confident that we are. And I mean a very, very small window. It's getting smaller every day. But I'll never come out and say, yeah, it's going to be, what month is this, February? It's going to be like March 20th or May 16th or whatever. I'm never ever going to say that because I'd be pretty stupid to do that. But B, I don't know, Nobody knows. That's the whole thing. So I think 2033 will be significant. To what extent, I have no idea. And I've said, a few times now, it could be the middle, the beginning, or the end. But it is tied in with the 70th week somehow. So many things are boiling over right now across every spectrum, whether we're talking about society collapsing in on itself, Western civilization, freedom protests everywhere around the world. People are tired of the status quo. People are tired of the way the world was. They're so desperate now for something different, something new, that this is the perfect opportunity for Satan to bring in this new technology that basically is how he's going to enslave the whole world. Everybody that doesn't, whose name is not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, they're going to fall for this. So, God's given us a small window of time to really vocalize the things that are coming to pass. And myself and many others and much more adept speakers and teachers. And we all stand on the shoulders of the greats like Missler and Wolverd and Ryrie and, Ironside and on, Larkin and everybody going back through time who didn't have the luxury of Google, didn't have the luxury of, BibleGateway.com. They had everything they learned, they had to, through years of study and a life dedicated to serving the Lord, and a life's well lived, And you look at a guy like D.L. Cooper, who came up with, he's most well known for the golden rule of interpretation, which is, basically you take the Bible for what it says, unless taking it literally makes it nonsensical, then you got to look at the surrounding context of the passage. But unless it makes it nonsensical, if it doesn't make it nonsensical, then you just take it for what it says, right? And so that's the literal, grammatical, historical hermeneutic. But if you study D.L. Cooper's life, that guy was fluent in 9 languages: Hebrew, Greek, like Sanskrit, I think Egyptian, French, German. The dude was a true scholar in every sense of the word. And if he says something to the effect that we need to take the Bible literally, unless taking it literally makes it nonsensical, but otherwise take it literally, then he's a good authority to go off of, and much more valid a theologian than somebody like the Bible Answer Man, Hank Hanegraaff, who recently converted from whatever he was to like Eastern Orthodox. He wasn't even sure in his own faith, let alone in eschatology. So, we stand on good authority. We stand on very good authority that the scriptures, what the scripture teaches about the last days, like I say a lot, the Bible, the end times, it's only going to happen one way. It's not a multiple, choose your own adventure book. I want to go preterist. Well, that's how the reality shakes out for you. No. The reality is going to play out the way the Bible says it's going to play out, regardless of what we think. And if you take the Bible for what it says, just let it speak as it says without trying to superimpose your thoughts or opinions into it, then you're going to come to the same conclusion that I came to, that the Bible talks of a premillennial, that's the overarching view of the end of the kingdom, right? That Christ has to return, and then he establishes his kingdom. The church doesn't do it. The Pope doesn't do it. It's not ongoing right now. Didn't happen in the first century or whatever, that he establishes. Christ is the only one that can establish his perfect reign over the earth. Secondly, is that the rapture precedes everything else, and then that is pre-tribulation. That's pre-70th week. That's how it's going to play out, because the church is not appointed to wrath. In all 7 years, all 21 judgments are God's wrath, not just half of them or 3/4 of them. All of it is. Christ is the one that opens the seal judgments. He's the only one found worthy in the entire universe in Revelation 5 to take the scroll, the sealed scroll from the right hand of the Father, and then begin to open those seals. And once he begins opening those seals, and he opens all 7, that triggers the trumpets, and that triggers the bowl judgments. And even within the seal judgments, a quarter of the earth dies. So how is that not judgment? How is that not God's wrath? We've never lived in a time when a quarter of the world's population died. Even if you added all the wars up that have ever been fought from today all the way back through antiquity, anything that we could get a number on, we've only ended up losing like not even 1 trillion people, like 500 million. No. It's like 500 billion, I think, is what it is. Am I saying that right? No, it can't be 500 billion. 500 million. And you're talking about 2 billion people being a quarter of the world's population dying in a very, like, just a number of years. I mean, that's carnage on a scale we haven't seen since the flood. And we haven't seen the flood. I mean, we know about it through scripture, but the world has not seen that level of carnage since Noah's day. From James Wells, question: the 500 witnesses that Jesus saw after the resurrection, were they present when he ascended to heaven? I know the disciples were. You know, I don't know. There's a good, solid solution to that. So we go to 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul mentions this initially. I want to say that it's during the 40 days that he was back after his resurrection that he was seen by 500 people, or over 500 people, but not that they were all there when he ascended. Moreover, brethren, I declare to you the gospel which I preached to you, which also you received, and which you stand. Sorry, it's kind of dark. Turn some light onto this so I can see what I'm reading. By which you were saved, if you hold fast the word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you first of all that which I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, and that he rose again on the third day according to the scriptures, and that he was seen by Cephas, then by the 12. After that, he was seen by over 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain to the present, but some have fallen asleep. So he was seen by over 500 at once, but I'm not sure that was at the ascension. If you go back to Acts and Luke, let's see who was all there at Acts. So obviously Luke, writing Acts, says, let's see. The former account I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began both to do and teach until the day in which he was taken up, after he, through the Holy Spirit, had given commandments to the apostles whom he had chosen, to whom he also presented himself alive after his suffering by many infallible proofs, being seen by them during the 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of God. And being assembled together with them, he commanded them not to depart from Jerusalem, but to wait for the promise of the Father, which he said, you have heard from me. Let's see. For John truly baptized with water, but you shall be baptized with the Holy Spirit not many days from now. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? He said to them, it is not for you to know the times or the season which the Father has put in his own authority. Now, they were asking specifically about the kingdom, not about like the rapture or the church or anything like that. So they're still thinking Old Testament. Jesus continues, but ye shall receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And now when he had spoken these things, while they watched, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. Now, I believe this was the disciples that were there watching him, not necessarily a throng of 500 people. But I do believe that he appeared to 500 people for sure. And it could have been in just one of his appearances after the resurrection, perhaps recorded, perhaps not recorded. I don't know. But it seems like that's the case is being made, is that he was seen by a very large number of people at the same time, some of whom were still alive when Paul wrote his letter. Tubin for life. Why are the 144,000 in Revelation not raptured with the church? Well, they have a specific role to play inside of the 70th week. Simple question. I mean, simple answer. Some have alluded that they would be like 144,000 Apostle Pauls running around. I don't know if that's the case. I've alluded to the fact in one of my books that they might be children of a particular age. You know, they're still virgins, right? Jewish male virgins. They might be brought back. They might be Jewish young men or children that were killed and brought back to be witnesses here during this time. I don't know, but they're not raptured for a particular reason. And we see in Revelation, I don't think it's any mistake that in Revelation 7, you have the two groups mentioned. You have the groups, the 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, minus Dan and Ephraim, I believe. And then in the same chapter, you also have the multitude, the innumerable multitude of tribulation saints that are martyred for their faith, that John sees standing before the throne, that their numbers couldn't be counted. So I don't know if one has to do with the other, but you also have the two witnesses of who I believe to be Moses and Elijah, and you have the angel proclaiming the everlasting gospel through the heavens. So they may make up like this triumvirate of witnesses of God's power and authority, even during the time of the tribulation upon the earth. So that's the role they play. That's why they're not raptured, because God is using them for something different. Now, who they are right now, I couldn't tell you. I mean, none of us know. It's kind of trying to figure out, like, who exactly is Babylon of Revelation 18. I think we can narrow down Revelation 17 fairly succinctly as being a Babylonian system that has corrupted the whole world. But as far as the actual final Babylon city, and again, we know that the city, the throne of Satan, has moved from place to place over time. It's not just stayed in one location, it moves. And the same thing with the whole statue of Nebuchadnezzar. The whole statue is Babylon. If the head is Babylon, then the rest of it is Babylon. It's just different variations of Babylon in different locations. So, but none of us can say dogmatically that it's New York City, or that it's Rome, or that it's Babylon in Iraq. You know, the whole thing about what Dr. D.L. Cooper said about, you know, taking the passage literally, unless taking it literally makes it nonsensical. And so just taking a literal Babylon of Revelation 18 and putting it back into the boundaries of modern day Iraq, is that nonsensical? Not necessarily, but I mean, given the current circumstances, it's like saying, let's just say hypothetically that the Babylon was going to be coming out of the new Atlantis. The Atlantis was going to arise out of the ocean and become this mighty empire. Well, how long would that take? You know, like if that's what it said, I'm not saying that's what Scripture says, but if that were the case, then you're talking like at least another 100 years, 50 at least. So, but to answer your question, I don't know why they're not raptured. It seems like they have a role to play inside the 70th week. and God is using them and set them aside specifically for this particular reason. Whether those kids are alive today or young men are alive today, I mean, I don't know. I know that right now there's presently 15 million Jews alive on planet Earth right now, of which I believe 7 million are in Israel, physically in Israel, maybe 8 million by now. So more than half are in Israel, back in their land. But around the world, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 million Jews. Out of that, could they have 144,000 male virgins? Probably. So it stands to reason that they could exist today. And they may not know their tribes, but God knows who the tribes are. You know, they weren't lost to him when they got conquered by the Assyrians. Ah, you're welcome. All right, from Adam Herman Arch. Thoughts on the files? It has been mind-blowing so far, but no one is talking about it for some reason. I'm assuming you mean the Epstein files? I talked a little bit at the beginning of this about the files themselves. I mean, clearly Epstein's network was far and wide, far-reaching, and he had a lot of, he seemed like a facilitator of all sorts of things, not just young women, but also scientific experiments, financial services, probably intelligence gathering and extortion, blackmail. I'm sure that was one of his many portfolios that he dabbled in. I think that, again, to kind of circle back to where I started with Trump, if the Epstein files had any kind of damning information on Trump that was credible and not some just salacious, you know, hearsay, anonymous, you know, whatever, if it was credible, they would have already used it against him a long time ago. I think he was not wanting this to come out because he knew this would be this giant distraction, and he's got so much. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the A-Team, the movie The A-Team that came out not too long ago, but in the movie, Hannibal Smith, the colonel of this A-Team, he gets thrown in jail, and I'm paraphrasing his statement here, but he goes, "You give me 10 minutes, I'm good. You give me an hour, I'm great. Give me a year," because I think at this point in the movie, he'd been in the jail for like 6 to 8 months, almost maybe a year. He goes, "You give me like 6 months, I'm unstoppable." You know, so think about Trump losing the election in 2020 or having to take it from him. It seems now we just witnessed we lived through a coup, a silent coup. He has been wargaming this to the nth degree and surrounding himself with very loyal but very intelligent men that understand history, understand geopolitics, understand how they all interact with economics, and then really just wargaming this out every aspect. Now, clearly, there's some things he's not going to be able to know. He didn't know he was going to get shot at, you know, in Pennsylvania, and then almost again in Florida at the golf course. There's certain things he could know, and there's certain things that he wasn't going to know. But I think that moment that he was on the ground or on the stage in Pennsylvania, in Butler, Pennsylvania, and the cameras were able to like see him while he's got all these Secret Service guys piled on top of him. And he's on his hands like this, and I can just think that he's thinking, how do I handle this moment? This moment is going to be iconic. It's going to be forever. You know, it's going to be like on magazines. And he goes, how do I best use this? Not out of a sense of propping himself up, but for galvanizing his base. And he got up and chanted "fight, fight, fight" 3 times and shaking his fist in the air in an act of defiance against the system, right? And I'm not saying all this to like do this huge love fest on Trump. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the guy thinks through these issues orders of magnitude around other people. And, you know, he wrote a book called The Art of the Deal, right? Well, that whole title he got from Sun Tzu's Art of War. So there is a method to his madness. And if people that, I haven't read the book, but I've read parts and pieces of it and stuff over the years, but people that read it say, look, if you read his book, you'll see exactly what he's doing right now. He makes some grandiose or over the top statement about whatever, Greenland, we're going to take it if we need to, and all of this stuff. And it gets everybody just running and panicking and all this stuff. And he's just sitting back, letting them do it, knowing that they'll come back and negotiate, and he needs to get them to the negotiating table. So whatever the deal is that he ends up with is going to be far better than if he, simply just try to be polite and nice and, go in there and try and negotiate some kind of thing. No, that's not how he does it. So, I think another aspect to this whole thing with Trump is that you've got some people even in our camp, I'm sure tonight are here watching or will watch, people on Facebook, and they just hate Trump, regardless. And I'm not trying, he's not the pastor in chief or anything. I'm not trying to sell him like that. He's not the Messiah. I don't think he's going to fix America the way he thinks he's going to fix America. Like, we don't have another 100 years to go. We don't have this, creation does not exist so that America could be thriving. You know what I mean? Like, God didn't set all this in motion so that America could just be this place of free speech and low taxes and, whatever. You can be whatever you want. God had a time. He had a plan in place. He had a structure to this. He details this throughout Scripture. He details it throughout Bible prophecy about how this is all going to play out. And creation doesn't exist so that we could pay $2 for gas, or that we can buy eggs for $2, or that I can go get a small business loan and start my own business and work at that for the next 40 years. He doesn't exist so that the stock market can stay at record highs. He didn't create reality so that the way we live today can go on forever. That's not why creation exists. It was created with a purpose and a plan in place, and that plan is going to come to fruition regardless of who's in office. It just so happens that Trump's in office, and it just so happens that we live in a system that's binary. You either vote Democrat or you vote Republican. You're not the third options, fourth options. They don't mean anything. And if I had my druthers and I had to live under one system or the other, we lived under Biden for 4 years and it was a nightmare. And I just look at, despite the things that Trump does that I don't agree with, and that I don't personally approve of, or that are not biblical, or that are not, that are anti-Israel in some way, shape, or form. I've got to balance that with, okay, well, he's stopped the flow of fentanyl into America. He stopped illegal immigration, human trafficking, child trafficking, all of the nasty, nasty stuff that goes on. And so you just take the good with the bad, but recognizing that overall God is sovereign, and this is all part of God's plan, because he's the one that appoints leaders, raises them up, and takes them down. So, if anybody wants to be angry, they have to be angry at God, because ultimately this is part of his plan, and this is playing out exactly like he said it was going to play out. But I find that the people that are within our camp in particular that are anti-Trump are almost, how do I say this? They become very anti-Israel. I'm not going to say they're anti-Semitic per se, but they grow. The people that I know that are very much against Trump, that are Christians, and this is not a blanket statement. I know that there are people that don't like Trump that are 100% for Israel, without a shadow of a doubt. I know that. I'm just saying my interactions with people, I've seen them change over time. People that I thought were solid Christians, that were solid pre-trib, solid this, and this. As soon as they begin to turn on Trump, they become very anti-Israel at the same time. I don't know what the deal is. I've also seen a lot of pro-Trump people that have also begun to be so pro-Trump that they're America first. Israel needs to get back in line, back to where, you're in the back of the line kind of thing. Like they think that Trump has been completely bought by Israel. So it's kind of both extremes I've seen play out. And I think that both of those are dangerous places to hang out in because it takes you into some dark places. And so again, I've seen people that are very anti-Trump become very anti-Jewish. And then I've also seen some folks that are so hardcore MAGA that they're also anti-Jewish. So I think most people want to be somewhere in the middle of those two groups where you recognize that Trump's a man, he's a politician. He does some good things. He does some things we don't agree with. Overall, he is a friend to Israel, which is what the Bible says in Genesis 12:3, that I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. So we want him to be friendly with Israel. But Trump is his own man too. Like he's just going to make decisions based on what is strategically in the best interest of the United States above anybody else. So I'm not here to convince anybody that you should like Trump. I really don't care if you like him or don't like him. I just think you should at least be honest, right? And again, friends on Facebook, every time Trump does anything, they're just blasting him left and right. But during the times when Biden was in power and he completely just screwed up the Afghanistan withdrawal, or he did this, or not a word from these same people. I'm like, dude, if you're gonna provide honest criticism, it needs to go both ways. It cannot just be one-sided, or else you're showing your bias. I don't think that Trump has done everything right. In fact, there's a lot of things he's done that I don't agree with. But I still prefer him over Kamala Harris. I don't even know where we'd be right now if she were in power. We'd probably be being conquered by China or something. I don't know. That was a long-winded answer for that. Sorry about that. Sir Pierceville, or no, this is from KLTZ6GN. Question, do you think the one reason the world will turn against Israel when new world religion is required and Israel will not be interested in abandoning their original religion or rituals to follow it? Yeah, I kind of do. So the way I think that this will play out is that after the rapture, obviously the true church is removed from the earth. So whatever's left over within Christendom is not the true church. It's the false church or the apostate church because they're left behind. And in that, of all the churches that exist right now on planet Earth, the most well-organized and well-funded and best structured is the Roman Catholic Church. They're basically in every country. And they've had 1,000 years to get their act together. And they've been very crafty about how they do. And the Roman Catholic Church traditionally has been very anti-Semitic. Even going back to the days of Constantine, So it makes sense that, one, the rapture happens. There's a period of chaos. How long that is, I don't know. And in that chaos, the forces of Gog and Magog will look at this as a perfect opportunity to finally get rid of Israel once and for all. So they band together this coalition of Sunni and Shia and African and Middle Eastern and presumably European Arabs and Islamists. They will all march in all the 4 different directions against Israel, thinking that there's no way that Israel can survive this onslaught of how many that's coming. And it will look overwhelming to Israel. They won't be able to. The only thing that they could do at that point is nuke themselves. That would be it. And that's the only way to take out their enemies, like the whole Samson option. So God will supernaturally intervene, destroy those armies, forces to the last man. And you're going to have a significant portion of militant Islam almost instantaneously wiped out. Now, Islam will still exist in places around the world, but I'm talking, these are the hardcore of the hardcore guys that are marching against Israel. They're on this holy crusade thinking once and for all they're going to get rid of the little Satan. The big Satan is gone. It kind of collapsed in on itself because of this disappearing of all these people. And aliens will be showing up at the same time. So they'll think it was part of that, or whatever. They'll come up with all sorts of reasons for it. But they're going to look at this opportunity to take out Israel. And if you're a Jew at this time, you know what the battle of God, you know what Ezekiel 38 and 39 says. And you also know that God's going to deliver you. And what follows chapter 39 is chapter 40. From chapter 40 on, it's all about this new temple. So the Jews are very cognizant of this, and they think that the battle of Gog and Magog is the war to end all wars for them, and they're going to enter into this messianic age. So for them, they don't have the book of Revelation. They don't have the New Testament. So for them, this is like the last major battle. They would tie in Zechariah 12 and 14 and other passages, with this as corresponding to the same event, right? This last great battle. Thank you, T-Bone. And this for them, they believe at the end of that, when God supernaturally delivers them, that's the messianic age, and that their Messiah will rise up. And their Messiah is not God incarnate, the Son. He is just a man. He's a great political leader that will lead them in the new messianic age, right? So they think they're done. And that's why they have no issue entering into some kind of new agreement with whoever the new political leader of the world's going to be. So for them, they're going to get their temple restored. I think at the end of Gog and Magog, there's a great earthquake in Jerusalem. I think that the Dome of the Rock, if it's not already destroyed at that point, it will be destroyed at that point. And the whole Temple Mount up there will be cleared. And nothing will stop them from building their temple at that point. So they will quickly rebuild their third temple, thinking that they're entering into this new messianic age. This new leader rises up that's, presumably like a European version of Trump. But this guy will be articulate. He'll be able to speak multiple languages. He might be part Jewish. He might have like a great relative that's Jewish, and he can claim that. And so the Jews kind of trust him. And I don't think he's going to be Muslim for sure. I mean, for 2,500 years, not 2,500 years, 1,500 years, Muslims have been trying to kill Jews, and all of a sudden they're going to accept an Arab or a Muslim as their leader? I don't think so. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. So to me, the whole idea of an Islamic Antichrist is ludicrous. Just on the face of it, it seems absolutely insane, because Arabs and Jews have been fighting for the last 1,500 plus years, and all of a sudden they're going to be friends, or they're going to have their Messiah is going to be an Arab or a Muslim. So I think that the Antichrist, at a minimum, will be part Jewish, and he seems to come out of the old Roman Empire, according to Daniel 9:26, of somewhere out of the old Roman Empire, which includes most of Europe, North Africa. I don't think it'll be out of North Africa either, because that's almost entirely Muslim. So this guy comes along and says, hey, I'm gonna allow the Jews to reestablish their faith and their religion, whatever. We'll even bring in Noahide laws. The Jews that enter your area, they have to. And at this time, Israel's borders will have expanded again, and he'll make some kind of deal with them in regard to their temple, or maybe some type of an exclusion for them, as the whore of Babylon religion is rising up in the world at this point as the new force. I think Israel will largely be not say ignored, but left to be on their own for a short period of time, while this new beast system recalibrates and gets its bearings and figures out its regions and its leaders and all that kind of stuff, all that turmoil that'll happen with that. And then at some point, presumably by the midpoint, that's when the Antichrist will enter into the rebuilt temple, into the Holy of Holies, and declare himself to be God, thus committing the abomination that causes desolation. So at that point, the Jews that are watching and were leery of this and have been warned or come across scripture or listened to the 144,000 witnesses or the 2 witnesses, however they find out, they're going to flee Jerusalem, just like Jesus warned them that they should. Hey, thank you, Tubin. Appreciate that. Okay, let's see. How do I get rid of this? Somehow. Okay. From Patrick Hart, what's a good way to explain the gap in the 70 weeks of Daniel to an unbeliever? He doesn't believe it isn't explicitly mentioned. What's a good way to explain the gap in the 70 weeks of Daniel to an unbeliever? Oh, okay. Hey, thank you, Jeremiah. Appreciate you. Jarhead was Jesus. I would take them to Luke chapter 4, the beginning of Luke chapter 4. No, I'm sorry. It's in the middle of Luke 4. It's after the wilderness. Jesus comes into the synagogue at Nazareth, and it says, so he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. And he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah, and when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written. And this is quoting Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind. And then he stops, and it says, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. And he stops right there. You say, look, why? So Jesus stopped right here, and you're both reading at the same time and said, okay, well, let's read what he's quoting. So you go to Isaiah 61, and you'll see that Jesus stops reading, closes the book on a comma, whereas in Isaiah, it keeps going. And there is one last part of this that Jesus does not finish because it wasn't time for that yet. So Isaiah 61, the Spirit of the Lord of God is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and open in the prison for those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God. So Jesus did not finish that last part of the scripture. My question I've used this before, like, why did he stop? And they'll say, well, I don't know. They'll either say, I don't know, or they'll say, well, because it wasn't time for that yet. So exactly. So you have between the 69th week, where Christ is crucified, the end of the 69th week, and then you have the 70th week, which hasn't happened yet. There's nothing historically that we can look back on to see that's ever taken place. And, unless you're a full preterist, like a partial preterist will say, well, all 70 weeks were done in the first century, but then the second coming is still future. So they still admit that there's a gap. Now they're putting the gap out of the 70th week, but like there's still a gap. Why is there a gap? And what's the difference between putting the gap before the 70th week or putting it after the 70th week? Well, the problem they have is that when you read through Revelation, that's the 70th week. And you can see all the judgments and everything playing out there. And that's why Revelation is so heavily Old Testament. But a full preterist will say, well, no, Christ came in the first century. Well, obviously, it's heretical. Two, it's asinine to believe that, because there's no evidence of anything to prove that Christ's second coming happened in the first century. And furthermore, the book of Revelation was written way after the destruction of Jerusalem by like 25 years. And it puts the second coming in the future. So clearly it could not have been tied to the destruction of Jerusalem. So all that to say that there is a gap. We can see in other places where there's gaps in time where God intentionally pauses one thing, finishes something else over here, and then comes back and finishes the first thing he was doing. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Israel. That they crucified him because he was offering them the kingdom. But he said, you have to be, if you want the kingdom now in your unregenerate form, you have to be perfect like my Father in heaven is perfect. And nobody could do that. And so they rejected him. You know, it was one thing to say, thou shalt not kill. But when Jesus said, if you look at your brother with hate in your heart, you've already committed murder in your heart. So you're equally guilty. So how can anybody fight against that? I mean, anyway, so there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but that's how I would do it. From Ron Bishop, how is the Antichrist revealed? What reveals him? So Daniel 9:27, which is the 70th week, we know who the Antichrist is because he is the one that makes this covenant with many. Well, let me read it. So actually, if you go back to Daniel 9:26, I think it's 9:26. We see that Daniel's given the 70 weeks of years. It says 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, and to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So clearly those things were not finished in the first century, that they still are ongoing. Not all of those, right? But you know, everlasting righteousness has not come in yet, not in this world. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. 7 and 62 is 69. The street shall be built again and the wall, even in troublesome times. So this is when we go back to the book of Nehemiah, chapter 2, where Nehemiah is he's let go by Artaxerxes to go and rebuild the city and the walls and the streets of Jerusalem in troublesome times, right? They had a shovel in one hand and a sword in the other. And here it is in 9:26. And after 62 weeks, so that's the 62 plus the 7 weeks, so the 69 weeks total, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. So we know the Messiah was crucified in 33 AD. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The people of the prince who is to come. So the people who destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD were the Romans. The Roman legions under General Titus came and destroyed Jerusalem. They sieged the city beginning around the end of 67 AD. And it went to 70 AD as a siege. And then that was, or 69 AD. So that was the year of the 4 emperors when Nero commits suicide, which means he can't be the Antichrist, right? Nero commits suicide. And so then they had 4 emperors that year. They were all vying for power. So for Titus's dad, Vespasian was one of those guys that ended up taking the throne. So there was a time where they pulled back from the city down to the coast. And then as Vespasian takes control, he tells Titus to go back and take Jerusalem. So they go back and they recircle Jerusalem, and that's when the destruction actually takes place. And during that time when they had pulled back, enough of the Christian Jews at that time had fled the city because they remembered Christ's warning in Luke 21. So here it is the people of the prince who is to come. The prince who is to come. So this one that's going to come, he is the nearest antecedent that we get to in verse 27. So let me read 26 again. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come, so the prince who is to come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week. He shall confirm a covenant. The he is the prince who is to come. who destroys the city and the sanctuary, right? So that's how we know who the Antichrist is, specifically from this one chapter or this one passage. Christina Reese, how soon do you think more church protests like the one Don Lemon was part of could happen as time goes on here in the U.S.? I think if they make an example of these folks in particular, because I posted a video on, I think it was on X, another church, they were trying to leave, but they were protesting outside the church and being really just obnoxious. And I'm not sure where that took place at, but the police were there, and obviously people could leave. But I think if they throw the book at these guys and gals, and they get serious prison time for interrupting a church or doing and protesting a church like that, hopefully that curtails that from happening again. So, from Angela Blake, question: thoughts on voting reforms push having one national vote day with paper ballots? I think we need that. I think back in the day, you went to, that the evening of an election, you went to bed that night knowing who won. And it seems like since Bush won Florida by the hanging Chad thing in Florida, I think the elections have been like wonky ever since. Unless it's been a complete blowout, So I think that if they can pass the SAVE Act, require voter ID, as well as getting rid of the mail-in ballots and doing away with the mail-in ballots and doing away with these machines, I think the Congress will still stay Republican, and Trump will be pretty strong going into the end of his the end of his administration here, and whoever is going to run for him, whether that's JD Vance or Marco Rubio or whoever, I think that those guys are going to be set up pretty well. The system will be set up pretty well to fight this voting fraud. And again, I think, that's part of the reason why I know people hated Trump, right? So I'm going to write in Jesus Christ, or I'm going to write in whatever. And I mean, you vote your convictions, but at the same time, I'm like, you're just giving votes to the Democrats. I mean, it's like for every one vote we have, there's 15 of theirs that are fraudulent, and whatever. Melody Phillips, what's your opinion on 2020 election being overturned? What will happen if it will be? I think it will be overturned. I think the evidence is pretty overwhelming at this point that the voting fraud was so egregious. And that's why a lot of these protests are happening right now. They're trying to draw both attention away from that, as well as trying to make it painful for Trump to keep doing this. But I mean, simply going into Fulton County and showing, hey, 300,000 of these votes shouldn't be counted because they're all fake. Right there. I mean, they could easily, plus the whole auto pen, scandal with Biden signing stuff that he never signed or even saw or read into, executive orders and things. I don't know what that looks like when they overturn all this stuff, but I mean, in my heart of hearts, I'm hoping that people go to jail. Raffensperger in Georgia, that guy needs to go to jail. Secretary of State, he's a Republican, he needs to go to jail. There's a lot of people that were complicit in this crime of the century. From Sarah G, Texas, 58. So many crimes are being committed every day. We wake up and see massive corruption, and it seems like not many arrests are happening. Why do you think there aren't more people being arrested? Well, one of the greatest, and I say that in a negative way, greatest corruptions that Obama brought in when he came into power was he wasn't just that he came in and had his administration there, but he also permeated every level of government with this corruption. Thank you any second now. I appreciate that. He was taking the playbook from Saul Alinsky, the organizer from hell, literally, that praised Satan being the first rebel, and the Cloward and Piven strategy. He took all these different things and began to spread that corruption at every level of government so that it was so pervasive that it would take decades to undo. That was the plan. And by then, they would have long since been dead. And they were trying to, recreate Tammany Hall, in Chicago in the early 20th century. This idea that, late 19th century, that there was, that they would be a one-party system in power forever. This elite oligarchy of just corrupt Democrat leaders forever. They would never lose another election. And it's fascinating how fast that's all come apart. And I think in large part, this is God. God was exposing this through a guy like Trump, because, this whole thing with Trump, this whole thing started in, let's see if I get the year right. I think it was 2011. And Trump was at a correspondence dinner, and Obama was president. And at that time, Trump had been making public statements about the veracity of Obama's birth certificate. And Obama just ridiculed and shredded Trump in front of everybody. And he was just like the laughing stock of everybody at that dinner. And from that moment forward, it was game on. And so Amora Rosa, who was Trump's apprentice, the black lady that was on The Apprentice with him, I don't remember her specific role, she had made a comment to the effect of like, and this was after the dinner, she said something to the effect that, she goes, I don't think Obama really understands what he started. He's not prepared for what Trump's going to do. And here we are, 11, was it 15 years later, second term, third victory, second term in office. I mean, if for nothing else, at least it's exciting to watch. It's not like we have Bob Dole there as president, or Ford or somebody like that, some just kind of dry, whatever. It is like fireworks every single day. And Trump knows this is it, man. He's not going to get a second chance at this again. And he knows he's old and he's going to expire at some point. And he is trying to Embry and Tammany Hall took place in New York, not Chicago. Thank you for that correction. That's right. I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking Chicago. Chicago had their own version of Tammany Hall. I don't know if somebody knows what that is off the top of their head. So yeah, so that is, I think all of these states that are blue states that have been blue states for a long time, for decades, over 20 years, have been solidly blue or one-party systems. They're all collapsing. I think they're going to start collapsing this year. Even California, as far as a state, look how many major industries are just fleeing out of California in droves. And then with Trump going after the illegal aliens who the Democrats imported in to be their new voter base, because blacks and Hispanics Americans were, the Americans that were black and Hispanic are beginning to vote Trump because they like what he's doing. They want to make money. They want to have a safe place for their families. They think it's just as unfair that like they had to wait in line to come over and do it legally. And then now the Biden administration is just giving, folks off the boat from Haiti or from Venezuela or from wherever, just like, hey, here, stay at this, $1,000 a night hotel for months on end, and we'll also give you these credit cards with, how much, $1,500, like giving them all these benefits that they never got. They had to work hard to get to where they were. So it does create this great deal of resentment, even amongst those communities, to see that, hey, we've been here this whole time struggling, and you're just throwing everything at these new folks that are coming in just so they'll vote for you. and their eyes are finally opening up to the machine, the Democrat machine, and how they operate. Okay. So I do think arrests are coming. They already are. And I think that whatever it is that they have under wraps right now with Fulton County, Georgia, is where we're going to start seeing a lot of the big names start coming in, which is why Tulsi Gabbard was down there, because this had foreign interference involved with Venezuelan machines. And Trump just needs to get a couple to flip, and he'll start flipping all of them. Okay, last question. And thank you, moderators, for collecting these. Appreciate that. Trumpet call, C5H. Question, could Ezekiel 39:11 and Joel 2:20 be pointing toward the same event of Magog being buried toward the eastern sea? Let's see, Ezekiel 39:11. What was it? Joel 2:20. Joel. Then, all right, Joel 2:20. Okay, let me read these both back to back. And it will come to pass in that day that I will give Gog a burial place there in Israel, the valley of those who pass by east of the Sea of Galilee, I'm sure, or the Dead Sea. And it will obstruct travelers, because they will bury Gog in all of his multitude. Therefore, they will call it the valley of Hamon Gog. Joel 2:20. But I will remove far from you the northern army, and will drive them away into the barren, desolate land. With his face toward the eastern sea and his back toward the western sea, his stench will come up and his foul odor will rise, because he has done monstrous things. Come to pass in that day that I'll give Gog a burial place there in Israel. The valley will pass by east of the sea, and it will obstruct the travelers. His face will be toward the eastern sea and his back toward the western sea, and his stench will come up. So it seems like it's the same location. I don't know if this is the same group of people, though. Because in chapter 2 seems to be dealing with Assyria. Well, I can say that it certainly has a lot of similarities, so it seems like that could very well be it. Unless it's like a dual prophecy where the Assyrians were mentioned in Hosea's day, it's being this invading, like this locust army coming like a locust, versus, that happened in that time, in the 722 time period, I guess, around that time. And then also seeing the fulfillment of that, the ultimate fulfillment of that down in the end of the last days when Gog and Magog happen. So certainly a possibility. All right. Wow. 2 hours has gone by. More similarities in the King James Version. Yeah. Let me look into that some more. That's interesting. All right. Well, guys, thank you for hanging out tonight. Again, I didn't have a huge agenda coming in. I was just wanting to touch on some things that are going on in the world today. Keep an eye on China. I think China's getting ready to implode in a very significant way. I think the U.S. is going to strike Iran within the next couple of weeks. What that looks like, I don't know. But it seems like the Trump administration's been in contact with the Reza Shah Pahlavi, the crown prince. I don't know if it's going to stay Iran or if they'll go back to calling themselves Persians or whatever, like the Persia or whatever. But he seems like he's getting his ducks in a row to take over. The U.S. delay in all this, it's multifaceted. It creates the fog of war. The IRGC doesn't know what he's doing. They're running around. They're creating all this patterns of life for him to fine-tune their targeting, get their people in place to intercept, the presumably a barrage of ICBMs coming against Saudi Arabia. Like the Saudis or the Iranian IRGC know that the chances of hitting and striking Israel is going to be pretty nil, but they're going to hit it. They're going to try and hit the world where it hurts the most, and that's right across the Persian Gulf to the Arabian refineries. So, but I do think that'll be in the next couple of weeks. Again, all this stuff with it, the Epstein files, more and more names will come out. And at the end of all this, Trump is still, he's going to be doing what he's doing, right? Because he's not in there in any kind of meaningful way, despite what you hear from if anybody mentions this on Facebook, whatever, look, if they had dirt on Trump, don't you think that would have been all over the place by now? I mean, that guy's been investigated more than any other person on the planet. So it would have already been out. So anyways, thank you guys for hanging out tonight. Let's see. I'm recording tomorrow with JB. I don't know when that'll post. Like, I don't know his schedule for posting that stuff, but as soon as that comes out, I imagine that I'll just post that whenever he releases that. Thank you, Pete, for the very informative info. Please consider coming back to Queensland, Australia, and the other guys get together for a conference again. I would love to go. I loved it down there. I would like to spend a little more time in New Zealand this time. I didn't get to stay. I mean, it was very brief, like 3 days, but definitely looking forward to going back. Just as a reminder, the next conference upcoming is going to be in Las Vegas at Pastor Curt Reed's place. Myself, John Holler, Tom Hughes, Billy Crone will all be there. So if you're able to go there, that would be great. See you in person. If not, there's the live stream options. I'll be on with Pastor Curt on the 9th, and then again at the end of the month, like the 26th or 28th. I think I've got it posted on there. And then the Technocracy Roundtables next Wednesday. That's all. It should be all Q&A for you guys. Come up with your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. And then live with Vinn Dogg. And I've got the dates posted on the thing there. I think it's February the 16th, 12th. I'm not sure. And then a couple of recordings, and as those get done and sent up, I'll post them whenever they get ready. So check out the Christ in Prophecy video I did with them, just dealing with Revelation 6, 1 and 2. And I think they have the whole series, and there's different speakers coming in and going through there. I'll have as these conferences start getting closer, I'll start promoting whatever the next conference is. And Lori, for Oregon, I am super stoked on doing that again. I don't know if and when you watch this, just reach out to me. We'll have to figure out a weekend. I don't know. Maybe sometime this summer would probably work best for me. But anyways, I'll text about it. And then McKinney, Texas, Christ and Prophecy is doing their, I'm sorry, Mississippi is in May, first weekend in May. At Flowwood Sheraton there. It's going to be an awesome event. And that'll be Alex Newman and I almost said Tom Cruise, Tom Hughes, and the Gauchers, and then myself. And then that's May. McKinney, Texas is going to be the 13th of June. And I think that's a one-day event too. So if you're in the North Texas area, it'll be Lamb and Lion Ministries. I don't know all the speakers yet that's going to be involved in that. I just know that I'm one of them. And then September, Fort Collins, Colorado. We'll be out there with Steve Schmutzer's group in the Solid Bread Community Church. I did that the first year. Me and Lee Brainerd had a great time. Looking forward to going back. And then the end of September, we'll be in Belfast, North Ireland. So again, I love going over there. I would move there if I could. I mean, it was gorgeous, and I just loved I loved it there. I probably wouldn't go there with Keir Starmer as the PM, but we'll see. Anyways, thank you guys. God bless you all. And Deborah Dorset, wish you could come to Louisiana. Hey, I mean, I'm not opposed to going anywhere. You know, I just have to work things out. But thank you guys for hanging out tonight. I really appreciate your support, your prayers, your friendship, your camaraderie. I love the fact that we're a small community. We're all kind of waiting for the Lord to return. But in the meantime, we're busy about the Lord's work. You know, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can both look up, wait for the Lord expectantly, but also be busy about what he's called us to do. So just keep doing that. And, you know, keep being salt and light in your community. You know, we know the weapons of our warfare are not swords and guns and bullets and things, but it's in prayer. It's in staying tuned to the word, keeping our eyes fixed on the Lord and on his promises for us in our life. And, you know, that's how we wage war in this kind of life. Don't get caught all up in the anger and the rhetoric that's going up on both sides. It's so easy to lose yourself in those kinds of things, but just recognize that this is all what the Bible told us the world was going to be like. It was going to be perilous times. People are going to be lovers of themselves, have itching ears. They're going to be haters of God. And we were all foretold this. And we also know that this is the last moment of the last days. So we just need to keep holding on. And this year may come and go, and we're still here. But you know what? We know we're in the season. And I mean, that season is getting shorter and smaller every single day. So we're not going to be waiting too much longer. But anyways, God bless you guys. Thank you for hanging out tonight. Thank you, moderators. Thank you for those who gave super chats and things. Certainly appreciate all that. So God bless you. Take care. Maranatha and shalom.